We decided to do this topic. It's when we think about talking about slow movement, I guess we could be saying we're going to be talking about Parkinson in general, right? Because slow movement is the hallmark of Parkinson disease, and it will be something that will be present in any activity that we can think of that affects how people have or not quality of life living with Parkinson. And I think we want to take it a little step further. We want to help people understand maybe how the snowball of slowness happens, because it's always a difficult topic for us to be predicting how things happen. But I would say I say we, it's like the scientific community and the clinical and the clinicians are trying to work out, and they should work this out obviously with people with Parkinson, what would be the right information at the right time. So we want to talk about this topic to be able to give you information that will help you understand better how Parkinson manifests in your daily life. Okay, so that is the goal. It touches upon different topics that maybe are less positive, but we hope that at the end it will be useful. I want to highlight that when we talk about slow movement, the most common word, or that you might also hear, which is bradykinesia, which is slow movement, is the clinical terminology that we use to describe slow movement. It is one of the hallmark symptoms of Parkinson's disease, which means you cannot have Parkinson without having bradykinesia. It is part of the diagnosis. You have to have bradykinesia plus other core symptoms, which you might hear about: the tremor, the rigidity, or the balance issues. Those are usually the four that are considered the baseline. But bradykinesia or slow movement has to be present. Okay? So when we think about, the slow movement, it was interesting. I was having lunch with a person with Parkinson today, and we were talking about this, and he says, I really don't notice that I become slower. I only notice when you film me. So because I usually like to use video as an example to help people understand what's happening, so they are able to maybe adapt the strategies that we teach them. It's a very powerful tool. Let me share with you how we look at slow movement. So slow movement implies three different changes. It implies, let me see if I don't have the rhythms, don't have the sound. I'll take the sound out. It implies that the speed of the movement is compromised. It will be slower. You can notice that it has to be also asymmetrical. That's one of the characteristics of Parkinson. So there's always one side that's slower than the other. What happens is also the amplitude of the movement. So the size of the movement also becomes compromised. And we will have moments where we have like 1 second or where the movement actually stops. So that's the rhythm is compromised. So when we think about slow movement, we think about all these three things. And that is what the doctor is assessing when he asks you to do these movements. When you go to a neurologist assessment, usually he will ask you a whole bunch of movements that sometimes people are like, I don't understand why he's asking me to open and close my hands, or if you can see my hands, it's like also tapping the finger. That's the most classical one. Open and close, turning your hands like this. This is all to assess the slowness of movement in terms of speed, amplitude, and rhythm. You can see that. I was going to say that even the sound is different, and that is actually was also there was a movement in order to also include it. So how bradykinesia sounds like. So you can always, these are movements, in case you don't know why the doctor is asking you this. The movements are controlled by usually the part of the brain that has less dopamine, and that will control, and that's why we ask those movements. It's the repetitiveness, the amplitude that is lost progressively, initially more at the end of the movement, and then you might have seconds where it breaks down. That is one way that the doctors use to measure how the bradykinesia or how Parkinson is actually progressing. Okay, so here are our goals. That was just to introduce our topic, and we want to to be able to share with you at the end is just like understanding why this happens, and how is this impacting our daily activities, and above all, let's focus on and what can I do about it. So is there ways that we can manage and at least endure the slowness of movement? And if we start by the first one, I think there's specific things of that happen in Parkinson that help people deal better with understanding why do I feel like this or like that today. So the fluctuating nature of the disease sometimes is very hard to understand, especially people that are around us, so family and care partners. It's like you were moving so well now, and now you're not moving so well, right? So understanding how the slow movement manifests throughout your day and throughout your disease, I think helps people understand how they can also find ways to bypass it. So one of the key messages is understanding that we know that Parkinson's disease is a slow progressing disease, right? I think the key word progress is obviously scary, and sometimes people forget the slow before it. So if it is well managed, people can live with Parkinson for many years. I've met someone with 50 years, if I'm not mistaken. And so it is one of the diseases that we can manage with several different tools. But now, when we usually are doing assessments, like how am I, one of the questions that people ask me most is, what I'm scared of is like, what's going to happen in a couple of years? What can I expect from the disease, right? And I think by knowing more, describing symptoms, I think, is not really helpful. It depends on your profile. It depends on how much information you want to know, which is usually a key question that I ask anyone. It's like, how much do you want to know? How much do you think is going to be useful, right? And so in the beginning of this, of when you get your diagnosis, here we are. We have this bradykinesia. We have this symptom that will give you that diagnosis. From that moment on, what we are expecting is that there will be mild progression of this, which, as I shared before, people might not notice. I only get, I won't say concerned. I notice more when I tell someone like this, so what's happening with your exercise? And the person turns to me and says, I don't have time to exercise. And I'm saying, I'm very curious about the reason why. Can you share that? And it's usually because the person is taking so long to getting ready in the morning. So imagine you take half an hour to get ready to take a shower or something, and then you start noticing that you're taking more time. So 45 minutes, an hour. And when I asked this person, the truth is the person was taking almost 2 hours to get ready. And then she had to get ready to get the lunch done. And then she had to clean up the kitchen. And so it seems like the person was using it as excuse, but it actually corresponded to how the slow movement was affecting. Let me just so what we are measuring when we think about progression of how this will continue throughout the disease is just the slow movement will be present, and it has to be managed. Now, I wouldn't say a sense of, when we understand the reason why or things that might contribute to it, it also gives us a sense of control, right? So this is an example of someone that got out of the car is doing this movement with everything in his hands. So you can see he has about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things in his hand, and he tries to get out of the car. You can imagine very easily the impact that will have over the speed and the quality of the movement that he's going to have to get out of the car, right? Which means if he comes in the clinic and says, you know what, I'm really irritated because I'm getting slow to get out of the car. And I say, can you show me how you get out of the car? Is a very good question, because sometimes we can just, you know what, and then he actually, this is based on me observing him without him knowing, and we stop to reflect about how having so much in your hand will affect the quality and the speed that you do it. But can we do something? And I was curious to understand why. And the fact is, the gentleman struggles to also get things out of the suitcase. He has a little backpack where he puts stuff inside. and managing, zippers and all those, being able to get the phone from inside the bag was a challenge. So he just decided to take everything out, and he was going to a meeting. So my key messages here is like trying to really understand why people do that is important. It's important for everyone, for the family, for the professionals, because there is ultimately always a reason why people are doing things the way they are. Usually it's associated to Parkinson, to saving some energy. So not getting so tired, but then unfortunately sometimes it doesn't work in our favor, like in this case. Okay, then one of the most important things that I think we can teach people is what we expect is the medication to be effective. It is studied, it is supposed to be effective for the bradykinesia, it's supposed to be effective for the rigidity. But what happens as the disease progresses, so there's two lines of thoughts. Some people will say, okay, as the disease progresses, the medication might not seem so effective. But is it because of the medication that's not effective, or is it because of the disease that just progressed? So you might get clinicians or scientists that are in favor of one or the other. But it is important in terms of daily life to understand that the doctor gives you medication for a certain interval. It gives you a dosage that will eventually has to be changed throughout the course of your disease. So if you start feeling slower and it's having a true impact on your quality of life, it's probably time to have that conversation with the doctor to tell him this, right? Because ultimately we know that this has to happen. The intervals to which the person takes the medication and maybe doesn't feel the difference. Sometimes I don't feel the difference of taking the medication or not taking it. And I say, that's a good thing, because what we want is for you not to feel that. The doctor prescribes the medication at breakfast and lunch and dinner on purpose, so that that interval is covered and you never feel that the medication is not having an effect. But unfortunately, either because of the progression of the disease or the medication, what happens is we start having these fluctuations where you might not feel that effect. Understanding what happens in those moments helps you understand that sometimes you might feel slow, or slower than usual. And that's understanding what could cause it, what I'll call here triggers. I'm sure everyone here can relate to the fact that if you are more anxious, and anxiety can be, imagine, even caused by cognitive stress, someone that's asking you too many questions in a situation of that you have to respond quickly, and that would be enough for the person to become cognitively overloaded and become also slow in terms of motor. You all agree? So realizing what triggers us will help us also understand what can I do about it. Because we might not be able to control so much, control or stop the progression of the disease, but we might have some control over what triggers us to have more slower movements than expected. Okay, that will be our key message. We want to just thank everyone that answered the questionnaires.
Yeah, and when we dig into the questionnaires, one of the key triggers that seems to show up over and over again is fatigue, which is something that many people with Parkinson's are dealing with. And it's often fatigue in conjunction with something else. So fatigue on its own it can be somewhat difficult to treat individually unless you can address it by increasing exercise or some other components. But the lack of sleep that comes along with that, or busy environments, noisy environments, sometimes multiple conversations that you're trying to keep up with, those are factors that you can address. Those are things you can do in order to make sure that you are able to keep your amount of stimulation. I mean, you were talking before about anxiety, different kind of stimulation. And then people below, if I'm running late or if I haven't taken my afternoon nap, and I think that's, again, things you can control. Others talking excessively, as a speech therapist, I know you're talking about. And then,
John, let me say, for all the introverts,
yeah.
that are usually introverts are more sensitive to sound. And so it's true. I have lots of people that say my neighbor comes downstairs and she wants to give me some company because she thinks I'm very lonely. And I really enjoy it, but after 10 minutes, I cannot take it anymore, right? So it's just like, having that limit of and being aware that maybe excessive talking might be a trigger.
For sure, because I mean, when you're talking about having a conversation and interaction, and you're supposed to hold part of that conversation, it's a lot of responsibility. And then the noise itself becomes its own source of fatigue. If someone's talking in a way that's not clear, whether it's too quiet or too fast or moving from topic to topic too quickly, these are all factors that are involved with that. One other one that I think is interesting, people talking about after meals, and I think that's one that very common. They call it postprandial hypotension, when maybe you get sleepy afterwards while all the blood in your body goes to your stomach to digest things. I would say for those situations, you can certainly look at that as factors you can control by the size of the meal and what you're eating. But again, all these are based around fatigue plus something. And the fatigue is a little bit tougher, but the plus something is something that you can definitely address.
Yeah, I was going to share. So the gentleman that you saw the recording, and he came in on Friday, and he woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be able to be in Lisbon at the time that we had booked. And so he was extremely more slower than the last time that I had seen the gentleman. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to do these films if you don't mind. So but it was interesting to know. So once he's seeing the videos, because he's very interested in to know what's happening, he was very shocked because he doesn't see himself as, and I said, listen, but let's place this into context. You woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you were on a bus for 2 hours, right? So it's like, give yourself a break. It's normal that you would be very tired at this moment, and especially if you told me you didn't sleep well. So it's I think this knowledge is supposed to help people understand, to identify situations that justify, why am I today not feeling good? And that doesn't mean that tomorrow I'm not going to feel better. Okay, so it should give you a sense of hope, and not actually, this, obviously the disease is, I wanted to use the word drag. I hope it's okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so following on our messages, there's other situations that I would even highlight even more. So that was what I just showed you, was like things that you can expect. So I know that I can expect that I'll get slower, and I'll be attentive to that to identify things that make me even slower that I can control. But there are other situations, which is crisis moments, which is it's moments where you suddenly lose, the symptoms suddenly become worse, right? And this could be related, for example, with you get a urinary infection or something, and then the medication that you might be taking, the infection on its own will probably cause you to become slower. It makes Parkinson worse. And all the symptoms that you might be dealing more, like tremor or something, those will become worse. So it's important for people to understand that Parkinson's disease is supposed to be a slow progressing disease, but there are moments where things that can happen. Imagine you have, a death in the family. You have some sort of crisis situation that it is enough to bring on more, a sudden, the key word here is a sudden loss of function, or suddenly feeling very slow. Something is wrong. Something happened that justified that. Okay. I want to give you some examples that, like changes in medication, are always a challenge on their own, right? Because every time you change the medication, there's always an interaction that has to happen. And sometimes it's not even the last one that the doctor gave you. It's just the interaction of everything that people take. You can have like the example that I gave, if you have something sudden death or something that might depress you, or anxiety attacks or something. Sleep is really a big issue because of this. People will always feel much slower the next day if you have, or even if you're dealing chronically with sleep issues, it will be more challenging to be at the right, I would say, mood or quality of movement. What's here, we have other stress situations. Sometimes unexpected falls would also be a cause for it. You might not, I fell, I got up, I'm okay, but then suddenly you start feeling that you're shuffling your gait a little bit more, you're slower than usual in the things that you're doing. So slow movement can be manifested in what? In your walking, in your talking, in your thinking, right? So it affects really general. That's why I was saying this is like global, we're talking about everything in Parkinson. Okay, so how about we try to recognize how this impacts, and again, also guided by the questionnaires that everyone filled out that we appreciate, because it helps us make it more validate or sensitive to the group that's here with us today. We wanted to think of, let's brainstorm on specific situations where people felt they were slow. And given the complexity of each one of these examples that I'm going to give you, what John and I did was to think about 2 or 3 things. If I had 5 seconds to tell someone something about the problem that you guys highlighted here, what would it be? Okay, so let me just give you an example. So daily life, obviously slow movements in daily life. This was words that we took from the questionnaires. So someone that mentioned getting dressed, especially socks and shoes, is something that really brings on the slowness, right? And now, because this could be a talk on its own, right? Getting dressed could be a talk on its own. So we just want to be very accurate on 1 or 2 things that you can do that really make a big difference. But the problems can always be looked in different perspectives. So these are fast tips that sometimes we don't think about, which is, I've always put on my pants, for example, in standing position, or my socks in this case. Reconsidering, what can I do about the way I do things? What can I do about the environment? Can I change something that will help me not be so slow, right? So the environment, for example, you're trying to put on your socks and you have lots of things around you. You're probably not sitting in a chair that helps you, favor you going forward. The standing position, I think socks, most people won't do it in standing position, I would imagine. I've seen, because I also do hydrotherapy, I see a lot how people get dressed, and sometimes I see some options that might not be so the best. For example, someone that takes jeans to hydrotherapy, right? So you can imagine when our body is wet, and then you're going to put on things that are very tight, how challenging that might be. So small things like that. It seems very obvious, but the truth is sometimes we don't really think about them. So hopefully it will reach a message. What we have here is about making things bigger. Okay, putting on the socks bigger, it's kind of difficult, but there are tools and things that help you specifically with these situations. But as I said, this could be a talk on its own. So I'm going to jump forward so we can cover at least most of the things that people said. Another one was manipulating small items. Yes, this one's really identified several times how frustrating it is. And when I think maybe of the American community, you guys are very less strict on clothing as we are in Europe. It's horrible. Here you have to wear ties and stuff like that. And so people really suffer when in their work they have to use these type of shirts. But hopefully, I think the most easiest one is like, just choose better clothes that are wider. Women that are particularly, I won't find the right word, which are, like to dress up a lot, might have more difficulty in adapting to wearing larger clothes, because I think that really facilitates movement. And that would be my number 1 tip, just make sure you use looser clothes. But there is a list of things that people can do. There are professionals that dedicate themselves to this. So if you're really struggling with this, if you can reach out to someone, they can see how you do it. So how I approach this is usually I film the person doing the movement so that I can see it in slow motion, so that we can together study the way the person is placing their hand. That sometimes it's just, once you just change something in the position of the hand, you might facilitate better the movement. So things like that, like me preparing things before to get ready, to reduce the decisions of me when I wake up in the morning and then I have to go decide what I'm going to wear. So there are strategies, so hopefully that's what we can transmit from these examples. Here's another one, which someone mentioned, dressing or undressing, taking a shower. If I had to choose one thing to say, believe me, I have a list of things that we could say, would be to use the rails. And it's not a question of balance or reducing the risk of falls, because you have that advantage, that's true. But it gives you a sense of safety, and it gives your brain an implicit message of safety. You are safe because you have this all around you. particularly like this one. This is from Nancy's house. And a person that's inside there knows that they can put all the shampoo they want in their hair, in their eyes, because at any moment I can just grab onto the bars, right? So I think even if you don't need it, it is really a smart thing to have. We had someone else mentioned that ladders and getting up from the ground was a challenge. I can imagine this is probably someone that is working in the garden. Each one of these problems would deserve an additional triage. So there would be lots of questions that I would ask this person, you know. It's like, is it, do you go out when your medication is working, for example? Is it possible for you to do some gardening maybe in upright position? So there's some gardenings that you do. I'm not finding it like
raised flower beds or something like that, right?
Okay.
Yep.
And then do we have like, I don't know, a pad on the knee that can help you then also facilitate pushing down, right? Because if you're provoking pain on the knee to get up, in this case of this picture. But again, these situations can all be brainstormed so that we can find strategies to help you reduce them. Another one that people mentioned a lot was arranging medication. So being able to, and this could mean a lot of things. It can be the cognitive overload of having to choose the multiple medications that people have to do throughout the week, throughout the day. And also in this case that I'm particularly showing is someone that is struggling to take the pill out of its little box, right? And not only the box, but out of the blister. I think it's blister.
Blister pack, yep.
Yes, because his wife actually cut it so close. So there's not enough space around it for the person to actually pressure down. And it was a detail. It's a detail, but sometimes we do things, and the idea was just to fit everyone inside the same place. But just consider that maybe how we do things, and can I do them in a different way?
Yeah, someone mentioned in here within the bathroom using a shower chair, and I think that's a very good one. It makes a big difference because then you're really secure, you're mobile. So, yeah. Good suggestion.
It's if you accept it, I think it's a very beautiful recommendation. Usually what people counter-argue, you know, like I give them strategies and they'll say, but this, right? So the but here is like, for me to go down, that means I have to get up. So to have a chair without having a rail, you might have someone that says, then I have to get up again. And so sitting and standing is obviously one of the difficulties. And most people, sometimes in transportations, it's like, but why don't you sit down? Because it's still going to be long. And the person will answer, because then I struggle to get out. So definitely the chair and the rail. Okay, then eating slowly.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that we were talking about before. I mean, it's not just the mechanics of, you know, getting food from the plate to your mouth, although that can be it, you know, mechanics of the hands. It could be some adaptive equipment, but I think the first easiest thing to do is to consider finding foods that are easier to eat. And some of that is easier to chew and swallow, so it's not quite so heavy, or also easier to get to. Either it's a finger food or it's something that is easy to pick up. You don't have to, like this gentleman here has got, looks like a pork chop or something on the end there, and it's like, well, a piece of meatloaf would be a lot better selection because you can work on that pretty easily and you can chew it a lot easier. So those are things. And then obviously we were talking before about the amount of distractions, and if you're in a dining area with a lot of folks, that extra noise and then the people walking around, the visual noise, both of those can actually add to your fatigue and slow you down. At the bare minimum, they'll distract you while you're trying to do something, but they can actually distract you while you're doing the swallowing part, which can be pretty destructive.
Yeah, my number one tip here, usually, if you know, as a physiotherapist, people come in and they say, I'm having difficulty eating, right, and handling the knives and forks. And I would usually say, can your husband or wife film you? Because I want to make sure that the position of the hands is the secret. What I've observed from being with people out of the clinic is usually the elbows are too close to the trunk. So people are just like, so Parkinson brings on more slower movement, not amplitude. And so the person tends to be more closed movements, right? So the elbows actually do the same thing. So while you're eating, the person has them closer to the body. And if you open them up, you position your hand in a different way. And sometimes you can handle better the fork with that. So that has been my observation. Today, I actually, while I was eating with the gentleman, I was thinking of another strategy that I wish we could impose, which is I found myself because I work a lot and interact a lot with people with Parkinson, I actually found myself eating slower than usual. And it wasn't thought, it's just like me naturally. So I was eating slower so that the gentleman wouldn't feel that slowness, right? Because I know he was going to take longer, so that means I'm aware of that. And so I slowed down. So hopefully, imagine we could just slow down the world, right? And I thought, well, that's an interesting strategy maybe to teach family. Why not, be sensitive to that? And then especially, and I actually did think about the American culture where you guys actually eat really fast, from my observations. We in Europe, or we sit down at the meal and we're there to interact, and so we take a long time. But so people might not notice so much. But in the US, I do notice that people eat really fast. So who knows? We might sensitive family members that might be listening.
Well, one thing too is just to getting smaller portions on the plate and make it a little easier and cut some of that pressure. You can always add a second helping or even a third in a smaller amount might be part of that too. So it's not quite so much time pressure. But I think that's a good observation. Good luck on getting the Americans to slow down if they're driving with their knees while they're eating their McDonald's while they're going to work or what they do.
Yeah, and if you're at the restaurant, you have the pressure as well of the waiters, right, that are trying to get your plate, and you're still eating, and everyone's plate's already gone. So that's the social pressure is also contributing to this problem. It is definitely a trigger, right? It's a stress trigger.
For sure.
Okay, we had someone else that mentioned toothbrushing. Yeah? Go ahead.
Yeah, and actually I remember working with a nonprofit, a dentistry nonprofit back in Colorado where we were talking about this because obviously oral care has a huge impact on health. I mean, it has an influence on cardiac function and ability as well as risk of infections for other things. And then obviously with Parkinson's, we want to make sure that you don't have any bits of food or whatever after a meal. So those are all things as a speech therapist you're worried about. And some of the basic recommendations, while there are ways to adapt with flossing or something like that. They have little flossing handles, not the little picks that you buy at the store, but actual handle that you can put it on there. In the end, if you can adapt with a water pick, it's not as good as flossing, but it does a lot of it. And then electric toothbrushes of all type will also help you do that because part of it is just getting the handle to the right part of your mouth and then having to work it. This helps you get around that. So I would take advantage of some, lack of a better term, technologies. And then, an OT or a PT could help you find some other adaptive ways to build up the handle if you need a little bit of grip or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Then we had someone that mentioned 3 things. So it was the same person. About using the vacuum, pushing the grocery cart, and preparing meals. I found this using the vacuuming very interesting. We do not know if it's a woman or a man. The questionnaires are anonymous. But I for some reason, I imagined the man. Why? Because I remember how sometimes family members want to make people more active, people with Parkinson, and so they give them certain chores that they think they are able to. Take out the dishes or something like that. And it's when I saw using the vacuum, I wanted to say that the best way for us to reduce slowness of this is to not do it. So if you want, I can write you a note. Your physiotherapist says that you should not use the vacuum. So for a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. It's actually one of the, as you can see from the position of the gentleman, it is completely a trigger for slow movement. Why? The fatigue is you can't run away from, because all you need is, like, even if you're washing dishes, your back is bent about at least 5 degrees, right? So here we can see he's bending forward. And now someone has argued, yes, but my vacuum is very special and I'm upright. And I said, well, that's very interesting, because I doubt that going underneath the sofa or, around obstacles, you're not going to bend forward. So honestly, I think the best solution would be find someone to do it, get another activity, because it will be really hard on your back, your legs will become tired, you'll become fatigued, and you will slow down, and it might affect what you do the rest of the day. So hopefully that makes sense to you.
Or get a Roomba, or get one of those automatic ones that come around and you can call it your voice.
Okay. I'm sure there's people that say, the woman will probably say that's not so effective.
It is a real vacuum, I agree.
But I do understand. I do see often that chores are distributed, so the intention behind is good, it's positive.
Yeah.
Pushing the grocery cart, I would not expect to be a challenge. So I have to think about, maybe it's probably negotiating how busy the environment is. Because sometimes people have difficulties with walking, and they actually find that using the grocery cart actually helps them in the walking in the supermarkets. So not knowing anything else, I would probably maybe imagine that it's about stopping and taking decisions on what you're going to take and negotiating busy places. But I could be wrong. If you're here and you want to add on, please do text us. And then the other one was preparing meals, which I think could be very common for anyone. Preparing meals, again, it could be a topic, a talk on its own. There are so many strategies that we can talk about here for how to prepare a meal to reduce stress. So I'm going to choose the number one, which is, imagine you going to do coffee in the morning or something. And what people usually complain about is, I go to the fridge and I forget what I was going to get, and then I'm talking with someone and I go here and I go there and I go get this, and then I forgot this. So if we create stations where we have the things that we need for that activity. So if I'm going to make breakfast, maybe I'll have my bowl there, my cereal, my coffee, my bread in the same spot, and not in different cupboards, and I have to go up and down to get it. That reduces stress, that reduces time. So hopefully, I think that's the number one that will occur. But I'll reinforce, there are lots of things that people can do to reduce the amount of time. That one would be one, and the next one would be dividing your attention while you're cooking and talking at the same time. Oh my goodness. Someone's trying to have a conversation with you while you're cooking. Be mindful of the interaction between thinking and talking at the same time, and how that slows people really down. Okay, we had someone that mentioned reading and writing. And I don't know if John, if you wanted to comment, because you said you had some solutions.
Well, I tell you one thing that I found has worked if you're using any kind of e-reader. So that could be an iPad, it could be a Kindle. But whenever you get these books, they give you the opportunity to order the audio at the same time. You know, you can obviously just listen to the audiobook on Audible, but what it will do is actually sync it up there, and it'll read it with the speaker, the person who's narrating it, and it'll follow along in the book. And I think that's a really nice strategy for keeping focused, and it gives you a little extra cueing, so you're reading it but you're also hearing it. I think that's one. I know that for people who have to present publicly, they'll keep like a highlighter, and they'll cross out with the highlighter as they're reading, so they can keep track of where they've been. There's ways around it. I think handwriting is one that does require a lot of attention. So once you start talking about that, but just for reading at least.
Yeah. So for writing, again, on its own, could be a talk. There are lots of cueing strategies. This is an example. So I'm using the word cueing, which is if we, so imagine the doctor asks you to do this. So you're tapping your finger, right? And the faster you do it, the more breakdown and the slower it becomes, right? This is what we expect in Parkinson. But if I put my hand up here, so I don't know if I cue myself, I can open and close as long as I'm hitting a cue, right? A target. So if I have something physical to hit, I will be able to keep the amplitude, which is, by logic, what you're seeing now in the screen, the writing. If I have a cue, a visual cue, to be able to keep up the writing, I will be able to keep good quality of writing. And this is trainable. And there's actually a research to support this now. I usually say the easiest way is to write in capital letters. because I think it actually stops you from keeping the pen on the paper, and the secret is to actually break down the movement by taking the pen out. So it's about the amount of times that you lift up your pen to write the next word that will help you keep the amplitude. Okay, so there's tricks around this. And just for the time's sake, I'm going to try and just go a little bit faster. Talking about social impacts. I think when people stop going to events because of how slow they feel, this means isolation. This means you'll have less interaction. It's not only about, losing parties or something, but it's also cognition. So it's important for us to really focus on this one as well. And let us give you just some quick examples about what people mentioned.
These all came from the survey, and I think they're very illuminating. We've heard some of them before, but there's always good to see a different twist. Someone mentioning right off the bat that they end up apologizing a lot, and sometimes maybe they're in uncertain social situations. They might actually turn the invitation down, which is fair. I mean, hopefully you're not taking yourself out of time with friends and family, but something that could be chaotic and maybe not as necessary, just so you don't have to explain away. This other individual was talking about being self-conscious of the hand tremors. That's very real. It's Parkinson's has the distinction of being fairly visible a lot of times, and that's a shame. So it can be a situation where you're feeling a little bit conscious about it. Not necessarily slow movement, but it's movement that's happening all the time. Keeping up with grandkids. Josefa, you had a really great idea for this because, good luck. So they're a great source of exercise.
Well, I look at each one of them and I think, okay, what can we do about this? And what I was thinking is kids always for fun and playing in games, right? So if you just play the game, the last one to get up from the floor will have ice cream. Maybe it will be less dramatic. So it's just find ways. I think kids can be very generous in the way they do this. But I can understand it's about, going out on the floor and then coming out and feeling the effort, which is trainable.
Yeah, I mean, something to work on for sure. Yeah. It's interesting. The next two are kind of two sides of the same coin. One individual's talking about difficulties when you have large social situations in crowded places, and that can increase your anxiety for sure. And other people are talking about in small groups, probably because you have more pressure to be a bigger part of that conversation and that interaction. And I think, again, each one has a different solution. As far as the noisy environments, you should pick those carefully. You can't always pick them, but if you're picking where you want to eat dinner that night with the friends and family, you can pick the place that has thought about noise mitigation instead of the loudest place in town. For the small groups, I think it's valuable to have either a communication partner, an ally like your spouse, to help slow down the conversation if people are going too fast, to fill in with a signal. We've talked about this before, so I won't go too far out on a limb. And a lot of public stuff too, going out to a concert, going out to lectures, going to visit friends or movies or out to eat. And again, these are things where you have to select those environments as well as you can. And then on top of that, I would also say that like a concert venue or a theater will have some places that maybe you can take advantage of as someone with Parkinson's. So you'll get preferential seating and easier access, and maybe even access before the show starts, just to make it a little easier to get in and out and reduce that. I'd say the same thing about airport. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll probably highlight that sometimes when people are preparing to go out, there's a lot of amount of stress about time issues and being rushed. And you always take too long and hurry up and stuff like that might be triggers. Remember, things that will make the person even slower, and so you will actually be more delayed. And because it's so natural in the family environment, we might not notice and be aware of it. And then standing in line, dancing is in my field. I would say that people that really love to dance and then somehow they feel that they can't really coordinate the movement and they feel slower. A slow movement can always be related to several factors, but in this case the dancing is about the rhythm. So when we talk about the amplitude, and we have lots of exercises for amplitude, right, for speed, but when we talk about the benefits of dancing and doing rhythmic things, there we focus on the rhythm of being able to use your hands and your legs. Once you bring in the legs, we lose the rhythm, right? If we bring in the arms, and that's trainable. So it's possible for people to just be mindful that that might happen, and that just means you have to break down the movements differently so that you can come back to what you were, right? So how you did it before. Okay, and then we had some people that said, yes, I used to bike ride and hike more as well, learn pickleball. I'm just going to go through it quickly because I'm mindful of time. All good. And eating in public. Yeah. I highlighted this one, that sometimes small talk is difficult. I am self-conscious of holding up the line. This was very interesting because, again, it's very specific to your culture, which is going to a store and people have this whole conversation about where you're from, what you do, which is, I must say, in a European culture, it's very particularly different. So I was fascinated to see this problem, which could be a severe problem because people are considered social and nice, right, if you talk back. But be aware that when you are talking, you are thinking, you become slow in your movements. If you focus on your thinking and what you are saying, you will become slower on your movements. Okay?
Pretty much so.
Someone mentioned here, about, and that's trainable, that skill is trainable, it's just being aware that that happens. Buying tickets and then wanting to sit in the balcony. So this is all about a slow movement, getting through crowds. My best tip that I can give you is if you can really just come very early where it's empty. That would be the best strategy. And I know this probably feels obvious to people, but sometimes we don't think about it. If you have control over that, it would be one way, because it is challenging to bypass people while they're sitting down. Not impossible. The rhythm starts, you're doing the repetitive movements, so it becomes more challenging. Okay, and then obviously exercise was also mentioned, that people become slower when in the exercise. They felt that too. And then some people felt that because it's of the slow movements, they're giving up tennis or pickleball, which is really fast type of exercises. Running is about rhythm. Often people won't feel that much difficulty in running because it's like it promotes you forward, but I don't want to go into too much detail. It's just, I think in terms of exercise, it would be interesting for us to understand what type of exercise would be better for to reduce slow movement, right? Now, if you think about it, you think about those three items that I said: amplitude, right? We have the rhythm, we have the speed, which should cue us for the type of exercise that I need to fight to this is exercise that trains my amplitude, that will then challenge my speed, and that will also help me train my rhythm. So that would be my recommendation. Think about what you're doing and if those three things are integrated into your exercise. Work. Let's think. Specific things of working. So someone mentioned door to door. This is more related to walking, I would say. And I think in terms of political, I won't even go into details, but I imagine there's emotion too. Now remember, this emotion can also be a stress factor. I can imagine if you're knocking on the door of someone that is not from your political views, that could be a source of immense stress. But okay, it would be nice if we could if there could be cueings for the walking situation when we become slower, the steps become slower, and then we could have situations where the person hesitates to take a step, especially under a lot of stress, a lot of fatigue. And this type of situation has a whole bunch of strategies that we teach people to, and one of them is this, what you see here. In the home setting, it's easy. It's cueing, it's using something that will help your brain know where they have to put the step, how to keep the rhythm and the amplitude, right? So that you can focus on the speed of getting things done. But unfortunately, outside, as I said, there is a list of things that we, as health professionals, namely physiotherapists, occupational therapists, can really help with that. Okay, we have talks on that, so you can go back to it. We're trying to give you a view about things that exist. We touched upon mental fatigue regarding maybe reading, but it's another way that bradykinesia manifests, which is bradyphrenia, slowness of thinking.
Yeah, we'll tie into this a little bit in a later lecture, but obviously when you have something that's affecting your speed of movement, it affects everything speed-wise. It affects the speed of how fast food goes down to your esophagus when you're swallowing, how fast it digests it, and part of that also how fast you're able to process information. This is why we like to train dual tasks, because it works on that directly, handling that additional load while still completing the activity, and we usually put a time pressure on it. So it's something that can have a real impact, and usually the impact is not like you're so slow you can't finish it. It's that something is dependent on something else that's happening, and that timing becomes a little bit mismatched, and that becomes pretty frustrating.
Yeah. Okay, we did. There's also a connection with emotion, right? So how I feel when the movement becomes slower, and people expressed very similar things, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of common words about being embarrassed or frustrated or sad that I'm delaying someone, exhausted. And, many years ago, I did a program that was on resilience training where you were kind of working through tools for addressing different parts of Parkinson's. And I think one thing that they could have benefited from one is learning to kind of own your space. And it's frustrating when you're not moving fast enough. That's your own internal, narrative. I don't accept when other people are frustrated with you. That's their problem, and it'd be very helpful to just you're in charge of what you can do, and if someone else behind you in the store is frustrated with how fast you're pulling your credit card out, that's their issue. That's like road rage. That's their problem. Get rid of it.
I had a British woman with Parkinson that has that British humor, right? And she says, "Oh, when I go to the supermarket and someone was there and manifesting how irritated they are because I'm taking too long, and then I usually ask what people do, and she said, well, I just turned and I said very politely, this bothers me more than you." So in her very British accent, it was adorable. So it's like, yeah,
very elegant. Yes, she's very elegant. I'm as annoyed as you are.
It's not like I'm doing it on purpose, right? So, yeah, it's fascinating. Okay, so jumping on to maybe organizing how people can manage slow movement. We already gave you lots of examples of maybe ways to bypass it with changing the environment or changing the way we do the movement and all these cues and training as well. But how can we see this globally? How do we think about slow, if there is an aggravation, so you feel that your slowness got worse, how are we looking at this? The best advice that we can give is, please stop to try to think what could be causing this, because this sudden changes in slow movement there has to be a cause, right? Sometimes we might not see it immediately, and obviously we need help from professionals, and they will do this. This is the rationale that they will think, what is the potential causes of this? And they will probably relate to, the first thing we relate to is like medication. Is the medication really doing what it's supposed to? Because imagine like constipation. We know that the medication will not be so absorbed if the person has constipation, right? So we know that if the person is having problems with sleep, maybe the medication. So we'll go through a list of things that we know that might have an impact. And so it's worth also the person understanding, for example, trying to see, is there specific things that makes this worse? And is there specific things that make it better? And these are usually guides for ways for you to manage it. So if I understand that if I actually sleep better, I'm going to be less slow. And because imagine there's a worsening of depression. For some reason, you are more depressed. And so that's impacting your sleep. It's a whole snowball, as you saw, right? So trying to understand what could be the potential cause is fundamental for you to be able to seek the right help. Okay. The first thing that we think about is medication. What can we do about that? What's happening? Why do we think about this first? Because as I showed you in the beginning, that is what is expected. We know that it's supposed to slowly progress, and that means that you will slowly have to increase your medication. Okay. It's part of Parkinson. Now, you could have different enthusiasts saying, no, I'll do a lot of exercise. That's true. There's lots of ways for people to control this, but unavoidably it will happen. People will have fluctuations in the slow movement. Then we had someone that asks us, so when you say, why doesn't the medication seem to help? And this is it's impossible for me to answer this question without follow-up with why. Again, thinking about things that will cause it, and always keeping in mind what I was just saying. It is, if you are stable, and it will naturally come a time when you probably need to adjust your medication. So you might feel that. But again, it's a sentence. There can be so many other things. I also want to highlight here that the doctor will prescribe you medication, and how you take it and how you make it more beneficial for you is also important. So I think we should go a step further. It's like, maybe if I have certain symptoms, I'm struggling in the morning to walk to the toilet, and can I maybe take my medication in bed and wait for it to have an effect, and then I'll start moving, right? So it's and these things you can I won't say negotiate. You can discuss this with your neurologist, and they will find strategies for you to be able to incorporate that better, the intake of the medication, into your daily activities. Okay. So moving forward, we have the rehab team, rehab therapy, so physiotherapy, occupational and speech therapy, and others that maybe I'm forgetting. But as we gave you lots of examples throughout those activities that people refer to that make them slower and where they feel they're being more challenged, there's a lot of either we do strategies, we teach you ways to be able to do the movement better, or we train those methods as well, or we do exercise as a global way for us to help you reduce the effects of, for example, fatigue or this conditioning that might make it worse. Let's think about specifically the cueing. Let me give you a quick example. So I'm going to take out the sound. So the way we do movements, the way we do movements will affect how much time I take. So if I push my chair back, I will probably be able to push my body forward. The secret about people would refer a lot, I get up, I take too long to get up. And it's the way that the movement is being done, the way we're recruiting our muscles, that's making it. So it's almost like you're using double the muscles than you actually need, because you're placing your body in the wrong, in the less good way. And so we give you an example here. Sometimes, if I don't think you can see my laser, let me see if I can. If I had to say one thing, it's this. What just happened here? The feet going back. Most of the people with Parkinson forget to put their feet back. That is the first thing that we have to do to be able to project our body forward. Of course, if you have a sofa or something like, or a couch or something that you can't, you push your body forward first. So you would first go forward, and then you'd go, you bring the feet back. These are things that are supposed to be automatic, and they stopped being automatic because you have Parkinson, right? And the health professionals will help you see this. So, I show this video. Oh, yes, I'm forgetting this. This is something that I can learn, and this is something that can help me then stop being so slower. That we can do is also to use tools that help us. And we have a list of problems, that people come with a list of problems, right? Awesome. And it's like, what, if we just adapt your bed with this support that you can see, it's enough to help you. Maybe we can focus on other problems. So sometimes people don't want adaptations, but the truth is it just helps us then focus on other things. This is another example from some types of exercises that could be more relevant.
Brush my hair. Open the door.
Reinforcing the idea that I told you, there are specific exercises that we try to focus on those three elements. And I used boxing as an example because boxing is very interesting, because you have a target, like I was showing you with the hand, you have a target where you're going to hit. So you are able to keep that amplitude. You are able to do with more speed without losing the amplitude, and you are able to do it with the rhythm. That's why it's so rich as an example. And dancing is as well, but I think the cueing in boxing is actually better. When we talk about walking and complaints of walking, as I just showed you, if we think about what is contributing to the problem, it will help us go more directly to the intervention. So walking is usually related to lots of things. I'm going to simplify here. So imagine people feel more balanced. That means their walking will be, because remember the core elements, it was rigidity, tremor, and balance, right? Postural instability. So that's the one I chose for the walking. This means that people are usually walking with their feet more close to each other. In something that happens early on, one of the arms are not moving, the trunk is not interacting in the walking. I want to just give you this example of the walking because it's so important for everyone. So if my arms are not swinging, my trunk is not rotating as much, I get more back pain, I get more rigidity, my feet are closer, I have more balance issues, and my walking is compromised. Now let's think, okay, so what in this snowball, what can I intervene? What is causing this? And when we look at the research to guide us, it's like we always come back to these elements of bradykinesia and rigidity, and how is that contributing to all the compensations that happen in movement. And now we think further, okay, what am I doing for my bradykinesia? I have my medication, I'm doing my exercise, I'm doing all the things that people tell me, but also highlighting a major impact that happens in social life, because we are social beings, which is dual tasking, which is you at the supermarket and you're talking with someone, and at the same time you're trying to put your groceries inside the bag, right? And realizing that this is a moment of dual task, and there is a compromise between this. If I'm walking with someone and talking at the same time, my walking will be different. Now you could say, yes, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Not talk with anyone? I go out for walks, it's to talk with people, right? So because we can't eliminate those things, that's where training comes in, right? And that's where we highlight a lot. Being able to add in cognition to your movement, to your exercises, is an important way for us to be able to reduce this interference in daily activities. So it makes you faster. That's our goal. It will make you faster in whatever you do. I won't show the video because I'm monitoring time. So I'm just going to go forward. Someone asked in our questionnaire, would it be helpful to practice fast movements? Yes, it's helpful, but remember, when we do fast movements, we also lose amplitude. So if you are able to guarantee maintaining the amplitude of the movement, because then imagine you're boxing and you don't have a target and you're just doing small movements, small. You have the benefit of aerobic exercise, but the truth is it's not the richest type of movement that you can do. So we want the amplitude, we want the speed, and we want you to be able to keep the rhythm of both. But above all, we want you out of the couches. So it's like, if nothing else, at the bare minimum, please reduce the amount of times that we're sitting down. And that would always be one way to reduce slow movement, is to actually do movement, right? So the more time you are sitting down, the more rigid you will feel, the more slower you will feel. And coming back to our chain of thought about how we handle this, there is always obviously space for sleep, for diet, and also for activity, as I just mentioned. These are basic things that you will see in any talk of Parkinson, right? I did highlight here someone in the swimming pool, because I think if you ask me one type of exercise, if it's safe for you to reduce immediately the rigidity and the slowness, this one is one you get out of the water and you already immediately feel better. So it's that one you can't, it works well. And then our last one, before we finish, is just do not underestimate the power of support groups, which means people find really interesting ways to bypass the social impact of slow movement. And I'll give you a couple. Mentioned in our questionnaire, so directly from you, someone that said, well, you know what, I just start early. I tell people I'll be late. So just being open, make sure we have friends that we are able to just say, I'm just going to take some more time. It reduces the stress. Then I sometimes don't ask for help if the other person seems stressed or irritable, which I found very smart. This is you being able to identify if the other person is really not in the mood or if the other person maybe is not in the best moment of the day. And so that might also be a way for you to control less good situations. Then I try to do things when no one else is around. So imagine if you're trying to get dressed or do something specific that takes longer. I guess that's the way people manage. And then try to become more comfortable with asking for help, which is tremendously difficult. Everyone expressed that in our questionnaires. But this person highlights something very interesting. People often like to help. I think normal people like to help. So they will be willing. Sometimes they might be fearful of wanting to help you when you don't want it. So if we can guide people on, you know what, I could use your help here with these jeans in this pool, for example. And I think the last one that I'll leave you here is someone that said, yep, I just roll my eyes, shake my head, take a deep breath and carry on. So these are not things that health professionals can tell you because they're not living with the disease, but I think the support group are very interesting because they can, just, you know what, I'm going through it and this is how I handle it.